Good morning and welcome to Our Black News. I'm Don Allen, broadcasting live from St. Paul, Minnesota. And my co host to my right or to your left, depending on which way you're looking, is Anthony Scott of the Scott Collection from his broadcasting live from his palatial estate in South Minneapolis. Anthony, how you doing this morning?
Very good. Very good, Don. Weather is breaking. I think snow is going to be gone pretty soon. Barbecue grill is going to get started, and it's going to be on soon, very soon.
Yeah, you just holding the book up for us to look at, or you going to talk about it? Help me out, bro.
Yeah, this is the Scott Collection. This is 500 pages of the work that my father did in 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's an encyclopedia of the Black
Yes.
community of the Twin Cities. It really is. I mean, you're going to really be able to get the history, and you should run. Don't walk to get yours. You should run, don't walk to get yours, because they are selling. And also our new book, Minnesota's Black Community, the 21st Century, is now on the shelves. So we're on the move, hopefully trying to bring some positivity back to this place.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a great. I remember my uncle Walter Battle. He had a copy of one from the 70s when I was a kid, because we used to have to cut his grass because he lived on 42nd and what was that, Third there, right
there, right down the street for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we'd walk from 37th and Portland all the way down to his house and cut his grass. And then after we cut his grass, he'd let us in the kitchen, and you could never go in the living room. And he'd have one of those books there. It's like be on his coffee table with all the Black community leaders, educators, doctors, lawyers. I mean, he was even in there. So that was
in there. He's in there. His wife's in there. Willa, she's in there. Oh, yeah.
And we just want to send our shout outs and thoughts and prayers to the people of Russia and Ukraine. I don't really get it. I'm not really trying to get it, but we don't need any more dead people anywhere. So that's enough on that. Before we start, Anthony, I would like to talk real quick here. We have former Hennepin County Sheriff Rich Stanek in the green room, and we'll bring him on in less than a couple of minutes. But before I get going, I just want to talk about this, and I feel it's important because there's a lot more higher priorities. I think hair is important. Not being discriminated against because of your hair is important. But we seem to be distracted. And I don't know where the Black legislative agenda is for 2022. I know there's a lot of individual folks out there at the state legislature trying to get stuff pushed for a hearing and then on to the House for approval and back and forth. But will there be a time when our education system is not great as it has been for many, many years, that we focus on something that will make change? If people are educated, you don't necessarily have to talk to them about someone's hair. I know punk rockers that work in corporate that have spiked hair, okay? They're doing well, okay? So they didn't have any problem. And some of the punk rockers are Black. So I get it. I understand. I'm not against it, but I can't be 100% with it because we've missed the point on some things that need to happen in the state of Minnesota, in the Black community, for our kids, for our families, for our everybody. Yeah, you're going to celebrate it, but really? Okay, Anthony, your thoughts.
Well, just quickly, Don, I have to say, I'll have to co-sign that because this hair legislation or whatever was such great fanfare.
Yeah.
It's really such an accomplishment that they have done something about hair. And you see certain people out there touting this, but I haven't seen them touting anything else that's important in our community. This came out with such great fanfare. I said, wow, this is really something. I haven't seen this person visibly for a while. And all of a sudden, the first thing I see is it's about hair. And I think Larry Graham did a song about hair, didn't he? I mean, hair, the style that I wear, very innocuous. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah. And again, we've talked about this, and now I finally got an academic label. It's called the Kardashian syndrome, because people want to be celebrities, right? And it's more than a process of doing something for the community, because really, how many people did you help change lives by passing a hit Crown Act? We don't know. But I know that if you change that to focus on homeless school children and get them in a house with their families, I know that I could see that happen and see things get better. But anyway, I could go on and on and on. And we have a special guest. I would like to welcome to our program this morning, Our Black News, former Hennepin County Sheriff, Rich Stanek, who is here with us. He's on the road doing the convention thing in the state of Minnesota, and we just appreciate you coming to the show. Good morning. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
Well, we're doing great. We're glad to have you to the show. I was talking to Anthony a couple of weeks ago, and last week and the week before, of course, and I said, this is going to be exciting because Reverend Tim Christopher called me and says, hey, you should have Rich Stanek. He's running for governor. And I said, you know what? That makes sense. I didn't think Anthony as a liberal would mind. And yeah, and I'm surprised you're on my side, man, with the hair thing, because you just walked away from the Blue Dog Democrat thing right into the Conservative Party. Thank you, but anyway, Rich, we're glad that you're here this morning. What was the motivation that pushed you to get in this pool of folks running for Minnesota governor? I'd like to find out first.
Yeah, well, that's a really easy question. First off, you got to know, Don, I appreciate over the years, you've always been very straightforward and candid, never particularly shied away from the tough questions. And I'm always happy to talk with you. Anthony, it's nice to meet you, former Hennepin County employee as I was. As you can see, we're traveling this morning up in northern Minnesota, going from convention to convention. And unfortunately, I'm in the car, so I apologize for that. But please note that I am wearing my seatbelt, which is always important as the former sheriff. But Don, you asked me why am I running for governor of the great state of Minnesota? It's really simple. Look, after 38 years of public service, 38 years as a police officer, living, working, raising my family in the city, I don't like what's going on. I don't like this increase in violent crime, record murder rates in the two core cities. And I didn't like what I saw back in the summer of 2020 with, what were peaceful protests at some point turned to something more than that. And there was absolutely no response from the governor of the state of Minnesota or the resources that he had available to him. And that led to, businesses literally being burned out and looting and vandalism, people getting hurt. And there was no reason for that. Here we are. You've got exponential crime increases. When I served my 12 years as Hennepin County Sheriff, we reduced violent crime in the county, including Minneapolis, working with the community as partners by 38%. Here we are 3 years later, and violent crime across Hennepin County is up another 25%. You can't go from 38% down to 25+% up and not expect some reaction from the citizenry, the residents, the voters, the people who live and work in these neighborhoods. And this is what we're seeing, which is why I'm here.
Okay, I appreciate that. Now, Rich Stanek was former Hennepin County Sheriff for a number of years, a Minneapolis police officer for a number of years before that, and the background is important. But I guess what I want to know is, you see all this stuff, and I was going to ask you about the 2020 stuff that went on in Minneapolis and how Walsh just kind of backed away of it on it, and a lot, like you said, a lot of people got hurt. There was a guy that got his eye put out that just got $2 million from the city of Minneapolis last week, and I'm like, wow,
Right.
that's kind of unnecessary. If the forces were on the ground, the National Guard or whoever needed to be there to kind of squash that. But why do you think? And I know you might not know another man's what's in his brain, but what was the concern that Walsh would not send out extra help to kind of control this violence during that period of that unrest? I mean, what would be your thesis about that?
Well, I think two things. One thing I know for sure, after 38 years of policing and leading a large agency like the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. And remember, for several years, I served as Commissioner of Public Safety for Minnesota. So,
Mhm.
I gave the advice and guidance to the governor on issues like this. I think at the end of the day, when everybody's in charge, no one's in charge. And clearly, in the hours and days following, the tragic death and the murder of George Floyd, that nobody was in charge. Everybody was scrambling around. And now we've seen 18, 24 months later, the finger pointing back and forth. That is not what the residents and the community wants. And they want direct action. They want to be safe. They don't want heavy-handed tactics, and they want to feel safe in their communities. They want to continue to work with law enforcement. You take, like, going back just a few months ago to November of last year with the defund the police movement,
Oh,
right?
yes.
I mean, even the African American community, and I've worked with them a number over my career. They didn't say we don't want the police. They said we don't want to be disrespected. We want to to police within the bounds that we set, and but we don't want you to wipe out the entire police department and start over. And now look what we have. We have kind of this hybrid. You're down 350, 400 officers in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Crime is skyrocketing. The only one that wins at the end of the day are the criminals who are emboldened. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. It wasn't the way it was under my watch for 38 years, 25 years as a Minneapolis cop, and 12 years as a Hennepin County Sheriff. It wasn't that way with, the community groups and others like yourself, Don, that we've worked with hard over the years.
Well, what I'd like to ask you, Mr. Stanek, is, with your long experience in law enforcement, and specifically in the county area here where we're living, why is this spike in crime? I mean, what is there something in particular that's causing this? I mean, I've lived here my whole life, and I've never seen an environment like this. I've never seen where it's unsafe, where your downtowns are really almost just abandoned. What would you say about why is this happening? I mean, is there some event that was it just the Floyd thing? Because it seemed to be happening before that. What would you say about that?
I think, George Floyd's death was just one, a significant one, but one in a series of polarizing incidents, not just across Minneapolis and the Twin Cities, but across the U.S. It happened to happen here in May of 20, and that led to, the protest, and all that. That's fine. People should be allowed to protest, to exercise their right to disagree. That's not a problem. That's not the issue. But there's a fine line when peaceful protests cross over to a riot behavior, and you can usually tell when there's smoke and flames and gunshots and people being killed and buildings looted and burned. That crossed over fairly quickly, and there was no action. It's never about the action. It's about the reaction, right? We call that a sheriffism. I say this all the time to my employees. And the reaction was stagnant, almost paralyzed by fear about what is or isn't. And they waited too long to engage and bring back peaceful streets. We've seen it happen in other parts of the country. We've probably seen it happen here in the Minneapolis metropolitan area, over the last several decades. But at the end of the day, the people who lose are the people who live in those communities. They didn't deserve that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and we saw a lot of stuff. But looking at the office of the governor, and I don't want to change it because something Anthony said earlier about this was happening, especially in Minneapolis before George Floyd was killed. The carjackings, the shootings, the uptick in crime, and someone sorry about that. Someone called me and said that did I think Governor Walz, our what's his name, Jacob Fry, Mayor Fry, and even Melvin Carter did not want to squash it the proper way, going through the channels, putting law enforcement out there, the sheriff's departments, the National Guard, because they did not want to be thought as racist. And I had to think about that, because we're in this society, especially in the Twin Cities, where some of them will not do anything that even would implicate someone from our community saying that. And if you know, and Anthony knows as well, in our community, there are people that actually make a living, make good money every year, approaching these both mayors and the governor and saying, this is this, and this is what's going on, and it's racism. And they dole out a lot of cash. And I've been watching this for a long time. So I'm a solution person. I know Anthony is too, but I'm really excited about you running for governor. And what are you going to do different than Walz? Say you're elected, and there's a good chance you will be, because Minnesota's fed up. And the other guy running against you, and I'm objective here, I'm just telling you what I see. No one's paying me any money, that we don't take any money, but this other guy that's running for governor, a conservative, and I'm a centrist that leans to the right, but he got on YouTube and says, hey, if I get elected governor, I'm gonna, what do you say, cut out Kim Potter's sentence. What do you call that when they drop the rest of the sentence?
Yeah,
he wants to commute.
Yeah. Thank you. You just helped me with that. I had a word block, and I shouldn't have that. But every person of color, I think in the state of Minnesota, said, okay, we're searching elsewhere. So that lost the race basically for him, that sentence right there. And so we need, and the Black community knows that when we've had a Republican governor in Minnesota, our communities did a little bit better. Not as better as they should have, but they have done better. So I have a question for someone that I'm going to ask along with this guy, a good friend of mine, George Jackson. He has two questions. Let's start with this one first and then the second one later. What would you do differently than Walz to make sure that all communities, especially the Black and people of color in Minnesota, those communities do well if you're elected?
Well, you have to, you can't just do it in, 6 months before his reelection. So the roundtables he's having across the metro area with local law enforcement, some community groups, right? The haves and the have-nots. Some people are invited to the table, many are not. You just touched on that a little bit ago. And, you've got to look at the long-term track record. He's a really nice guy, I'm sure. He's an educator. He knows his field. But in terms of public safety, you have to engage the community. You have to get the prosecutors, the judges, and the police working together. It is a three-legged stool. You can't have the prosecutors from the two core counties arguing about who's going to be more progressive than the other. You can't have the judiciary making unilateral decisions that aren't in coordination with law enforcement and the prosecutors. And you can't blame the cops for all the sins of the past. You have to be able to work with them. The police want to do good things. We've got a lot of great cops that work across Minnesota and the metro area. We've got some that aren't so great, and those are held accountable. When you talk about commuting the sentence for Kim Potter, that flies in the face of the rule of law. Everybody's accountable, and it went through the judiciary process, from a jury to a judge to a verdict to a sentence. And whether I like it or not like it, we live in a civil society, and you need law enforcement in a civil society. Otherwise, what do you have? You have anarchy. Anarchy prevailed those 3 or 4 days following George Floyd's death. There isn't anybody in Minneapolis that wanted to live in Minneapolis during that time.
No.
I live 18 miles northwest of Minneapolis.
Okay.
But I spend the better part of my days in Minneapolis. My family lives there. I was born and raised there. But nobody wanted to come down. And even now, people have trepidation whether they should come downtown and take in dinner or, visit some of the shops on the north side or the south side, northeast. They shouldn't have that trepidation. And, I'm the biggest cheerleader for saying, hey, look, you need to get back to it. But we also owe it to provide a safe environment. The day that I announced I was running for governor was there was a school shooting over in Richfield, right? The day of. And literally, as I was going to press the button to say, hey, you know, I'm a candidate for governor for the state of Minnesota, Richfield has a shooting, 1 dead, 2 wounded. Now, the next week, it's a school bus driver shot in the face with 3 kids on the board. The next day, it's 2 young men sitting in a car in North Minneapolis, shot dead. The next day, it's 2 separate incidents on I-94, the corridor going in and out of Minneapolis at different times of the day, shot. And supposedly no linkage between the two. You can't have that. That is, I mean, I don't know how you can live under those conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. Anthony, before I switch to this education stuff, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Well, I guess, you know, I guess I just have a fundamental question. I guess it's regarding you're running, I think, as a Republican, the Republican Party. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so my thing about that, you know, historically, I've never really voted Republican. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. But I did vote for a person, a Republican, that was going for governor years ago. And I voted for this person. For one, I knew this person very well, for one thing. But there's always this talk of what happened to, and I categorize that particular person. I'm not going to mention his name right now. Very high up, very wonderful guy, wonderful family. What does the Republican, where's the moderate Republicans these days? I mean, the Republicans that I see now, oh, the election was stolen. We've had a stolen election. We've had 45 is still president, and I know Don praises 45. He just, you know, just loves him to death. And so I'm just wondering, where is there any room for any type of moderate thinking as opposed to? And then the bottom line to that question is, what can the Republicans do? What party affiliation for Black people? I mean, are they welcome into the party? As I look at it from the outside, that's just a couple of observations. But really about the moderate Republicans, not the ones that are these far, you look at Fox News and you listen to that, and it's almost, to me, comical.
Yeah, well, you ask a great question, but I mean, think about it this way, right? I mean, you are an adamant Democrat, yet you voted for a Republican who is a friend. You believed in someone. When you go to the voting box, when you go to the ballot box, vote for someone that best represents your values, that best represents you at this point in your life. The partisan politics back and forth, you know, that's not always the answer, unfortunately. You're right about the moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats. Those are the ones I'm reaching out to, right? I mean, the hardcore on each side will continue to be there. They bring the values of their party and party politics to the table, but it's the people in between. Look, I'm a Republican. I've been elected 8 times in Hennepin County, 3 times countywide. I'm the only countywide elected Republican. I didn't do it because the numbers of Republicans, hardcore, are that many in Hennepin County. In fact, over the 12 years I served, the numbers probably declined. But what I did do was I reached across the aisle and I brought people of all ethnicities and nationalities and backgrounds to the table. And I had them believe in a vision that I had of what public safety would look like and how we could do it together rather than a polarized opposite. And we were very successful. And as I said when we started out the show this morning, you know, we had a 38% decrease in violent crime. The rapes, the robberies, the murders, the aggravated assaults, the drive-by shootings. That is not easy to achieve when you have a county of 1.3 million people. But we achieved it because we worked together. We had differences along the way. We sat down and resolved the differences. Many times I've had a chance to talk with Don. Sometimes we don't always agree, right? He's got different views about what republicanism is, maybe than I do. But I've never shied away from a conversation with people. When I had a meeting a couple weeks ago with Tim, Reverend Christopher, he's a really stand guy, and he gets it. He cares about the community, and we talked about some of the things we could do together. When I go over to Lake Street and I meet with Latinos and Somalis, other African Americans, Caucasians, Asians, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. We can do this together. The sheriff's office was really good with community engagement, a little bit different than Minneapolis police. And when I had a chance as sheriff, we did some things that I wanted to see, that I wanted to put in place, not just in Minneapolis, but countywide. And we did it with great results.
Yes. And during the time that you were sheriff, a couple of times, my mom had a business on 37th in Portland, and she was very happy with it was a daycare center. She's very happy with the service there. And I know that she always wrote a check, from what I understand, because I was a kid. I was like, what are you doing? Well, I was a young adult. And says, yeah, we got Sheriff Stanek. He came and talked to us at the church or over here or over there, and he's a good guy. And she never brought up Republican or Democrat. She always he's a good guy. And so the community communicated around you. And I also know some community leaders and self-appointed community leaders that, hold you in high regards. Even the late Mr. Ronald A. Edwards, who said, if you ever get a chance to talk to Sheriff Stanek, get him on the show. And that wish has been fulfilled. And I appreciate you for this. Now I want to move into something in my wheelhouse. And I'm sorry for using that word. I apologize, but because I can't stand it. Education. As you know, Mr. Stanek, we have the worst achievement gap. Minnesota public schools have the worst achievement gap between children of color in the United States, period, hands down. It's been a juggernaut for the last 15 years, and it keeps climbing. Right now, and I'm giving you data for the Minnesota Department of Education off your school report card and district report cards, and so I'm not making this up. But from a period from 2016 to pre-COVID-19 lockdowns, there were casts of students, including white students, in schools in the Twin Cities that had a math proficiency of 5% based off MCA and other things. There were students, not only Black and students of color, but white students too, that had never had a reading proficiency above 19% since 2016. It seems that if we were concerned about something in the state of Minnesota, it wouldn't be hair, it would be our kids' education. And so with that said, and I'm kind of angry about it because the opportunities are there to eliminate the achievement gap in under 2 years in Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's already been blueprinted out. And it seems that no one wants to move on it, especially the Minnesota Department of Education and the commissioner, which I hope you will replace in it. What happens to education when you're elected? The things you said already today about violence and crime and these kids and adults going berserk in the community, it can be eliminated if we start fixing that system, that gap, that system that says our kids don't deserve a world-class education, that our kids are biological discerned to do no greater than their parents did. And educators and the education system that licenses educators in a way that's a bureaucracy and is wrong and unfair. What happens to education the first 100 days when you get in office is my question. And then I'm going to throw it to Anthony because I know he's got some burning questions. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, you laid it out, right? The achievement gap in Minneapolis from kids graduating from high school, one of the most dismal, if not the most dismal rate anywhere in the country. Having said that, I'm also very proud to be educated in the Minneapolis public school system, both a combination of a Catholic grade school I went to, but also junior high and high school. Now, I'm an Edison grad. I know it probably doesn't sit well if you're from Henry or North or
Central
or Central. Well, but I went to Edison, and I'm very proud of it. And, look, you can do good things with a Minneapolis public school education. But you're right about the significant changes. Throwing money at the problem is not going to help. We've been doing that governor after governor after governor. There's got to be systemic change. School district number 1 is really large. It's not, the teachers, they want to do the right thing. These last 2 years with COVID and the forced mandates and the lockdowns and not letting kids get into the classroom, but rather virtual learning from home, I'd venture to say that achievement gap has grown even wider, kind of like the Grand Canyon. I know many of the homes did not have internet connections. I don't know how you can do virtual learning if you can't even get into the internet or access it because of, let's just be honest, the cost. I mean, not everybody is equal in that regard. And I don't think the school system did as much as they could do. Certainly not the governor. For 2 years, people have been farther and farther and farther behind. It happened out where I live in Maple Grove. It happened in Minneapolis. It happened in St. Paul. It happened in greater Minnesota. And that makes it really, really, really tough. And don't forget, Don, I mean, I would never let this go without saying, look, you also have to have families, right? Families are important. Moms and dads. Look, my parents died when I was 17, 18 years old, but God bless I had them. I had brothers and sisters and neighbors who stepped in to help. I still have 2 younger brothers. I'm 60 years old now. I have a 59, a 57, and then I have 3 older brothers and a sister. But even though they passed at a relatively early age, neighbors in that community kept us going. It's no different. The time might be, 40 years later, but I know what Minneapolis is capable of. I know what the Twin Cities is capable of. Greater Minnesota likewise. Look, this educational achievement gap in the last 2 years of having these forced lockdowns and mandates and not letting the kids do what they're supposed to do, even just the social skills. 2 years, imagine this, right? I mean, it was nice being able to work from home. I own a consulting business. I work with law enforcement chiefs and sheriffs across the country to reduce their violent crime rates. The only place I haven't been doing it is back here in Minnesota. Why? I don't think Governor Walz necessarily wanted me back at the table, right? But here I am. So by hook or by crook, I'm coming back, and I'm going to do what I do all the time, which is the absolute best for the people who live in these communities.
Okay, we appreciate that.
Anthony, what do you got?
Go ahead, Ann.
Well, I would be remiss if, once, an individual runs for any type of public office, once they run, there's going to be some digging. There's going to be some digging about things that people may or may not have done, or maybe just have been accused of fairly or unfairly. But there's talk that as a policeman, there may have been some accusations of police brutality against you personally. There's talk that in the community, maybe you used some racial slurs. Now, again, I wasn't there. I don't know what was said. But those things are out there. And I guess for those two things, I guess how would you respond? How do you respond to that?
Well, look, I mean, as a police officer for 38 years, I didn't shy away from working the streets and reducing crime. I dealt with people with guns, with baseball bats, arrest situations, accusations come. I've never once been disciplined or given a day off for my conduct, not as a Cottage Grove police officer, not as a Minneapolis police officer 25 years, not as the sheriff for 12 years. But I did manage an agency of 1,100 people, and we held our deputies accountable. A number of them no longer work there as a result of the actions they took. But, we always look at things very straightforward. Cops are good people. Cops are your friends and your neighbors, are the people you see at the grocery store, the movie theater, if we ever get to go back to the movies. I haven't been to one in several years due to this COVID thing. Many of them are married to healthcare professionals and educators. That's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I guess now I'm still on the education track, and I just want to put this out there: how badly we need policy change from the governor's office that includes the parents and the families, because right now in both schools in Minneapolis and St. Paul, I don't have any daughters. I have two sons, but I really feel pain, true pain in my heart when I find out fact that a 13-year-old girl comes to school one morning and she needs a plan B pill. You know what happened the night before. Do you know right now the current policy? You do not tell her parents. Okay, this student is given the plan B pill, monitored by the clinic nurse in the school, and sent on her merry way, and her parent is none the wiser. That's a problem. That's a moral compass issue. And that's how important right now it is that we need to change a lot of this in education. And so, getting back on point without ranting, you're in charge of, when you get elected for office, we're just going to put it out there. When you get elected, are you in charge of the commissioners at these different state agencies in Minnesota, appointing them, I guess? Would that be one of your roles?
Yeah, Don, you're absolutely right. I mean, the governor for the state of Minnesota will make a number of appointments to commissioners: the commissioner of education, the commissioner of public safety, right? I mean, that is my job. These are the people I entrust, and you find true professionals. You don't take somebody who's never done the job, put them in that role because it's a political appointee or political favor. Don't fall for that. Many governors have tried over the years. Put true professionals. You were just talking about education. And one thing I wanted to say earlier about that was, look, and you hit it, which is parents. There isn't a single one of your listeners I know as a father of two kids and a husband of 38 years that doesn't want to be involved in their children's education. It doesn't have a right to be involved in their children's education or deserve to be involved in their children's education. When you talk about 13 years old and they do something maybe they should not have done the night before, and they come to school, go see the school nurse and get the Plan B pill, that is not appropriate. That is not involving parents in their children's education. How can we continue to sustain like that? It is not right. And I will not put an education commissioner in place that doesn't work with the parents, that doesn't believe the parents have a say and a right to know what the kids are being taught in school. Kids have a right to an education, absolutely. And parents have a right to know, as their parents, what is being taught to them.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I know that didn't the Senate, Minnesota Senate, just pass some kind of legislation about? I think they did. I posted it somewhere. I don't have it in front of me right now, and maybe I shouldn't be talking about it unless I'm looking at it dead on. But it takes me a second to get right where I put it, and I think this is important to this point. That's why I'm going to look at it. As the Minnesota Senate passes school curriculum review bill. You don't know how important that was. Okay. And I'm going to explain this to you, Anthony, because you're on the left, but I'm going to explain this to you slowly.
I don't respond late, Don, so that's fine.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'm not trying to get on you, but you're always throwing 45 at me, so I got to get you back a little bit. 45 rocks. Anyway, this bill, the school curriculum bill, I was in a meeting and I said all English teachers should do syllabi for all 15 weeks of the semester for every class, every discipline. You know what? I thought that I was going to get strung up outside the school. So I says, okay, you don't want to do that? I'm going to write for all my classes. Anybody, Governor Stanek could walk in and say, let me see your syllabus. What are you teaching these kids with your PowerPoints? Right. Here, right here. It's right here. And I used the modern classroom project methodology, blended learning, self-paced structure, mastery-based grading to make sure my kids get it by the time they get out of my class. Here. And that move right there would change the face of education, but that's not what they're interested in. Their issue is, oh, them Republicans are passing a bill that's going to hold us accountable, as they should, because look at our numbers. So getting back on point, I'm sorry, I went on a tangent because I'm glad that passes. I hope it goes over to the House and is successful, because it's something that we need, and rather than we need to teach kids the information they need to know, so they have a world class education in Minnesota, not your political ideology. I don't want to hear kids when I talk about, and I talked about Trump one time this year, but I used it as kind of an underlying theme because we were talking about the HIV/AIDS crisis and how Reagan back in '84 kind of didn't accept it till Rock Hudson died. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But in talking about COVID-19 and Sheriff Stanek, I'm getting back to you here. Anything that comes out in Minnesota, especially in the Black community, like, let's talk about COVID-19. We were at the highest death rates. When it's bad, we're at the top. When it's good, we're at the bottom of it. We have places like the Department of Economic, DEED. And I forget these things because I have so much going on in my head and I can't stand that agency anymore. But they have never been able to really connect with anybody in our community in the state of Minnesota to make them sustainable over a long period of time versus these little short, we're going to give you 10 grand, which isn't even enough to keep the lights on. So when you replace these heads or these commissioners, or talking heads, what they are now, but when you put in commissioners that have done the job before, have some experience with it, what are the other traits that you're looking for? And I'm not trying to set you up or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, right now we have a system in Minnesota where you have to be politically correct. You have to be a member of a social club, a political party. Your pastor has to be this person over here if you're in this community, and that kind of stuff, rather than having the experience. What are some of the things that you're going to look for in these people besides what I just said to make sure that Minnesota can gain a solid footing? And like you said, it's not going to happen overnight, not in 6 months, not even a year. But how do we get to that point is my question.
Well, I think it's interesting. I appreciate you asking. Nobody's really asked me that before, but I certainly have thought about it. Again, I had a chance to serve as the Commissioner of Public Safety, and what I told Governor Palente at the time was, look, you're bringing in a cop at the time who had 24 years of law enforcement experience. You're bringing him into the Commissioner of Public Safety, whose job it is to oversee and give advice and guidance to the governor on public safety matters, and to work with other chiefs and sheriffs across the state of Minnesota to protect their communities. And so when I look for commissioners, I will look for professionals in their area of expertise. Again, not political hacks or political appointees. They may be political appointees by virtue of the job, but not political hacks. And there's a key difference between the two. So again, whether it's education, public safety, agriculture, you name it, there'll be professionals. There will be people who are vested in the community itself, not somebody who came here because it's a job. I want them to know Minnesota. I want them to engage in Minnesota. I want them to, these are not the highest paying jobs in the world. Public service is just that, public service. It's a passion. I could have gone out and made probably a lot more money doing what I did with my management experience and my leadership abilities, but I didn't do that. I chose to stay and serve as sheriff of this county because of the public service aspect. Public service is a calling. It's not it's not something that's just a passing fad or fashion. There are a lot of good people out there who serve on school boards and city councils. There are people out there who go to the PTA and want to engage. But I want people who really care about the people of Minnesota, care about the employees that are going to be working with them, and that their employees can support. Simple as that.
Okay, sorry about that. I was muted. That was muted. Go ahead, Anthony.
Well, again, with the appointments, I think these organizations, we have a multitude of resources here in Minnesota, Hennepin County. I mean, when they can get on TV and say billions of surplus, what do we do with it? We don't even know what to do with it. We got all this money. They should know what to do with it. And all of these organizations, I mean, the DHS, the police, the schools, they need to be working together. They need to be able to have some type of thing where they're working, and the families, of course, to say the schools can identify maybe kids that are struggling for whatever reason, because there's resources to help those kids do that. But it doesn't seem like these organizations, these different groups, the housing, that are working together to find out why are people struggling? Why is this particular group struggling more than this group? What can we do to address these things? And put all of their heads together to fix it. I mean, the school can't fix everything. They have the kids when they're in school for education specifically. Mm-hmm. Social services are supposed to be the safety net that really helps people get through these things so that it doesn't end up being a whole lot of criminality. We try to avoid that. But I know when I worked for the county, every year we met with the police, we met with the schools in that area, and we had a big kickoff so we knew who the players are, who we could call if someone's struggling at school, if someone's having some probation problems, or they're having some issues. How do we address that so it doesn't get worse? And so there needs to be some mechanism that these groups work together and use these resources for the good of the families that need the resources, as opposed to all this bureaucracy that we end up going through. I mean, how would you address getting these groups to work together?
You know, I would use the same model. Again, I go back to what I know best, which is, look, I've been an administrator, sheriff of a county with 1,100 personnel and $140 million budget. And then you just scale that up to the governor's office. But the one thing I know for sure, my years of experience, is you got to get people working together. I had to have all 8 lines of business. I had to have patrol working with the crime lab, working with the detectives, working with community engagement, working with the 911 dispatchers, working with the jail, court, and civil process if we were to provide seamless public safety services. You just scale that back down to education or whatever issue we're talking about. It's you bring people together and you empower them to get the job done on behalf of what the mission is. But the boss, the governor, doesn't get to be an absent landlord. He doesn't get to abscond and say, that's somebody else's problem. This problem's been there for the last 20 years. The last 5 governors didn't fix it. Why should I? Now you're right. You have a $9.4 billion budget surplus. That's what, almost 18% of the state's overall biennial budget. And what are we going to do with $9.4 million? The governor said, well, let's give $5 billion of it to education. What exactly does that mean at the end of the day? Let's give a measly $300,000 to public safety, yet you got record murder rates in Minneapolis. You got the record murder rate tied in Minneapolis. You got the record murder rate in St. Paul. You got carjackings up 60%. How are you going to invest in your community? What are we going to do for the people of Minnesota? Or should we just give the money back to the people of Minnesota, right? Give it back in tax breaks. I was telling somebody earlier today at one of the conventions I was at, yesterday afternoon, I drive a Dodge Ram pickup truck. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4". I'm like you, Anthony. I can tell you're a bigger guy, right? Tall. I'm 6'4". When I got gas yesterday afternoon, you're not that tall. You're short. I got gas and I paid $75 to fill my tank. When I got home last night at 12:45 in the morning, coming back from Big Stone County, Minnesota, 3.5 hours away, it cost me $89. In a matter of 3.5 hours, gas went up $14. It's now $3.59, $3.69 up in northern Minnesota. Inflation's gone up 8% over the last year. There's nobody on this call or listening to our show this morning that has had an 8% inflationary increase in their paycheck.
No.
And we owe it to the people of Minnesota to do better. That $9.4 billion budget surplus doesn't belong to the governor. I don't need to see a check with his face on it coming back to my mailbox. What I want are sustained reductions in taxes. It's over collected. It belongs to us. Give it back to us. Now reinvest back into the community if you wish, but give it back to us. Don't spend it. Make it worse. You just exasperate the problem.
Yeah, and I saw that. I read that somewhere, kind of how Governor Walz wants to kind of throw it around like it's his money, and that was very disturbing. And a $9 billion deficit, you can do a lot with, and you're absolutely right. It belongs to the citizens of the state of Minnesota, period. But when you have folks out there, I know starting in 2019, the state of Minnesota shoveled $600 million a year, or had been, into education. And with $600 million, as you know, Mr. Stanek, if you don't know how to run education and you have no experience, you get what you have now. So what would you do with the $9 billion? I mean, we know what Walz is talking about, but say it's there when you get there.
I'd like to make a suggestion. One suggestion.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
One suggestion. Stop taxing seniors, Social Security, and pensions. Minnesota is one of only 13 states that does that. So, I mean, if they've got surpluses, I mean, that's one thing they could just do right off the top. And that would help. It helps your seniors. It helps your economy. They can do things for their families. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm all for let's not tax Social Security pensions. Veterans pensions the same way. I don't know if either one of you are a veteran, but why are we taxing the men and women who served our country and worked so hard? The rest of it, I just soon see it come back in the form of reduced taxes for hardworking Minnesotans, the people who matter most, the people who overpaid to begin with. How could we have collected 17% more in taxes than what we need? They shouldn't have done this a couple of years ago when they raised it. And now here we are, you've got $9.4 billion surplus. And, the state's budget's only 50 point some billion dollars. So, I mean, I don't, and the number may go up again, may go down ever so slightly. But the point is, it's not his to spend. So when he says, I'm going to give you back or $3 billion in the form of rebates, that's really nice. He's going to give me back 10% on the dollar. I'd like to find a business where I only have to pay back 10% on the dollar for what I over collected. Give you back. And that was 10% when it was 7 billion. Now it's 9.4. And the numbers still don't make sense.
And those are big numbers. And I know that Anthony and I, on behalf of Our Black News, approached or put in some calls to the state capitol to ask Governor Walz about stop taxing veterans and seniors, their pension and all this. And I just like to play the response. You hear those crickets? Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. And with that money,
that's probably the same response you got, Don, when residents in North Minneapolis said, "Hey, people are being slaughtered in our streets, literally." And I'm sorry if that's so overt.
It's true, though.
Could you send us National Guard troops to supplement the police until they come back to staffing? And you got the same response.
Yeah, exactly.
Ridiculous.
And it was really weird. We talked earlier. You're listening to Our Black News. It's 10:22, and we're coming into the last 10 minutes of the show, or 8 minutes of the show. And so, one thing I want to say, we talked earlier about the defund the police misstep, the mismeasurement that the public relations arm of the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul sent out as to solve a problem after the George Floyd thing, which turned into political chaos because they never talked to the youth. Okay. Who found out in some circles that, hey, the police aren't going to come because they're going to defund the police. And then all this stuff that happened in North Minneapolis during that time, it was like the wild, wild west. And it still is, because people that I know that live, I have a professor who said he was sitting in his living room. He's my professor at Hamlin. He said, boom, 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 boom. His head is here. The bullet hole is right there, right above his couch where he's sitting. He's yep. Oh man, no one deserves that. Okay. And the Black community did not ask Walz, Fry, and Carter to defund the police. Okay. This was some PR stunt by Minneapolis City Councils and a couple other folks, which turned out to be horrific, because once they said it, they had security details at what, 60 grand a month or something, the city council.
Even Joe Biden denounced defund the police the other day during the State of the Union. And don't forget our friend KG, who lost his 3-year-old granddaughter, for gosh sakes.
Yeah.
She didn't deserve to die. She didn't do anything. And KG is going to spend the rest of his life searching for a person or persons that fired that bullet, as errant as it may have been.
Yeah, yeah. And I've talked to KG about that, and he's changed dramatically. He's on a mission, because that's ridiculous. And just the number of, I hope that the people are watching this today and they get a sense of who you are. We're not a normal talk show. We just go with the flow and whatever. No one pays us any money. I always want to make that very clear, because we have some of our other news agencies out there for communities of color that are led by their accounts receivable. And it's unfortunate, because we never get the real deal. And it's important that you guys get out and vote. But in closing here on 9/25, is there anything that you'd like to tell the community of listeners, yellow, red, black, and white, that watch our Black News? And this is also available on YouTube for playback when we're over, and a couple other places. But is there anything that you'd like to tell them? Why should they vote for you in November 22? Why will you be the best choice? Please go ahead.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on this morning. I would say this in closing: 38 years of public service. I work the communities every day. I haven't stopped working those communities. I may be retired from public safety. To bring me out of retirement back into public service as the governor of your great state is something that would be an absolute honor. I'll work hard every single day. I tell people, you just drove with me from Carlton, Minnesota over to Cohasset, Minnesota, nearly an hour drive under the speed limit. And, talking to people in greater Minnesota, and tomorrow I'll be back in the metro area working with the people in Minneapolis and the, suburbs of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And look for the person who best represents your interests, just like what Anthony said. He may be a lifelong Democrat, but he voted for somebody who best represented what he was seeing. Look at our vision. Look at where we want to go. Look how we can help. And look at that electability. At the end of the day, if you think Tim Walz is doing a good job for you and you're better off 4 years than you are 4 years ago today, fine. Vote for him again come November. If not, pick a different horse in this race. Take a look at my website, stanekforgovernor.com. Happy to be on the show this morning, Don. You've always asked the tough questions. I will always be here. I never particularly shy away. It's what we do. Sheriff.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best, and Godspeed on your tour of Minnesota. And hopefully by November, I have credential, or January of next year, I have the credentials to be qualified as a commissioner of education, because I like to throw my hat in the ring. And hint.
Absolutely.
It would change quickly. But again, thank you, Rich Stanek, running for Minnesota governor, for being with us. It's a rare opportunity. I appreciate it, and good luck, and we'll be in touch. You've been watching Our Black News.
All right, guys.
Myself, Don Allen, Anthony Scott, and of course, special guest Rich Stanek. Will be back next week, same bat time, same bat station. Thank you very much.